In 1998, a young journalist vanished from a quiet American town. Her car was found abandoned by a bridge, the keys still in the ignition, her purse untouched, and no trace of her body. For over a decade, the case went cold, until a forgotten notebook, a retired cop, and a single terrifying photograph uncovered a web of corruption, betrayal, and mafia ties that shook the entire community. This is not just a story of one woman's disappearance. It's a story of how far the powerful will go to silence the truth. Cedar Creek, Pennsylvania, was the kind of town that looked like it was taken out of a postcard. Nestled among rolling hills and thick forests, it had one main street lined with coffee shops, a library that doubled as a community center, and a police force so small that the chief himself answered routine calls. To outsiders, it seemed like the perfect American town, safe, quiet, and ordinary. But as history would prove, appearances can be dangerously deceiving. Jennifer Miles, a 26-year-old aspiring investigative journalist, had returned to Cedar Creek in the summer of 1998 after completing her studies in New York City. She was known locally as the girl who asked too many questions. Her friends from college remembered her as fiercely intelligent, sometimes even reckless when it came to chasing a story. She wasn't the type to let things go easily, and her determination often rubbed people the wrong way. When she came back, most assumed she would take a quiet job at the town's local paper, maybe settle down and leave behind her big city dreams. But Jennifer had other plans. She was working as a freelancer, pitching stories to bigger outlets, and she was already digging into whispers of corruption in Cedar Creek's own backyard. Allegations that some officers in the small police department were tied to illegal gambling rings and drug money laundering. For a town where everybody knew everybody, such accusations were explosive. On the evening of October 1998, Jennifer was at the Maple Diner, a popular late-night spot where locals gathered after work. Several people saw her sitting in a booth, scribbling notes in her worn leather notebook. Around 9:20 p.m., she had a short conversation with her friend, Kelly Harris, a waitress who had known Jennifer since high school. Jennifer mentioned she was heading out to meet someone, a source, she said, who had information about police misconduct. Kelly remembered Jennifer's exact words. If this turns out to be true, it could blow this town wide open. That was the last confirmed sighting of Jennifer alive. By the next morning, panic struck. Jennifer's car, a green Honda Civic, was found abandoned near the old Cedar Creek Bridge. The driver's side door was unlocked. Her purse lay on the passenger seat, and the keys were still dangling from the ignition. Strangely, there were no signs of a struggle, no broken glass, no blood, no footprints leading away from the car. The police launched a search that spread through the forests and riverbanks, but days passed with no trace of Jennifer. Dogs picked up a scent trail leading halfway across the bridge, then abruptly lost it. Some believed she had been forced into another car. Others feared she had been thrown into the river below. Her disappearance quickly split the community. Some residents whispered that Jennifer had stumbled onto something dangerous, that she was silenced for knowing too much. Others, influenced by police speculation, believed she may have staged her own disappearance to chase a bigger story or escape personal issues. But Jennifer's family refused to believe she would walk away. Her mother, Margaret Miles, made emotional pleas on television, holding Jennifer's photograph and begging anyone with information to come forward. Her father, a Vietnam veteran, spent nights searching the woods himself with nothing but a flashlight and fading hope. Weeks turned into months. Leads dried up. Witness accounts contradicted one another. The police chief insisted they had no evidence of foul play, but to many in town, that explanation felt like a cover-up. By the spring of 1999, Jennifer's case was officially labeled a cold case. Files were boxed up, stored away in the county archives, and Jennifer Miles became another haunting mystery. Her face on missing posters that slowly faded with time. Her name whispered whenever someone mentioned the old bridge. But the truth was not gone. It was simply buried. Buried in lies, buried in silence, and buried in betrayal. And more than a decade later, that truth would begin to claw its way back into the light. For more than a decade, Jennifer Miles' disappearance hung over Cedar Creek like a storm cloud that never passed. By the early 2010s, most of the missing posters were long gone. The diner where she was last seen had changed ownership, and people spoke of her case in hushed tones, like a ghost story told to outsiders. But for the Miles family, the wound was still fresh. Her mother, Margaret, had turned her living room into a kind of shrine, framed photographs of Jennifer smiling, stacks of her old notebooks, and a calendar on the wall where Margaret marked every year since her daughter had vanished. Her father, once a strong man who carried himself with military discipline, had grown frail and bitter. "They know something," he often muttered about the police. "They've always known." In 2011, fate delivered a small crack in the silence. A new detective, Sarah Connors, was transferred to Cedar Creek from Philadelphia. Unlike many in the small-town department, she was sharp, unafraid of pressure, and known for reopening cold cases others preferred to leave buried. When she came across Jennifer's file in the archives, she was struck by the inconsistencies. Why were there no proper forensic tests on Jennifer's car? Why had the diner's security camera tapes gone missing? Why were key witness statements so vague, almost as if people were afraid to talk? Sarah began digging, and what she found disturbed her. The original investigation seemed deliberately sloppy. Files were incomplete, interviews cut short, and timelines inconsistent. It looked less like incompetence and more like someone had intentionally buried evidence. She reached out to Jennifer's younger brother, Daniel Miles, who had been only 17 when Jennifer disappeared. Now in his late 20s, Daniel was working as a mechanic in a nearby town, but he never stopped searching for answers. When Detective Connors knocked on his door, Daniel broke down in tears. "Do you know how many times I begged them to keep looking?" he said. "They told me she probably just left. My sister would never leave us. Never." Sarah promised him she wasn't there to close the book. She was there to open it wider than ever before. As Sarah combed through old evidence boxes, she discovered something overlooked, a recorded statement from a truck driver who had passed over the Cedar Creek bridge on the night Jennifer disappeared. He claimed he saw two vehicles parked near the bridge around 9:40 p.m. Jennifer's Honda Civic and a black pickup truck with tinted windows. The driver said he noticed two men standing near the vehicles, but when police questioned him years earlier, his testimony had been dismissed as unreliable. Curiously, the black pickup matched the description of a vehicle owned by Sergeant Mark Riley, a veteran officer in the Cedar Creek Police Department at the time of Jennifer's disappearance. Riley had since retired and moved to Florida, but his name appeared multiple times in Jennifer's notes, scribbled alongside phrases like illegal betting and money through station. Detective Connors' instincts told her this was no coincidence. Jennifer had been investigating the police, and now an officer she had written about was possibly the last person near her before she vanished. When Sarah began asking around, she was met with resistance. Retired officers claimed not to remember much. Locals who had once spoken freely now gave nervous, vague answers. Even at the diner, Kelly Harris, Jennifer's old friend, seemed hesitant. At one point, Kelly pulled Sarah aside and whispered, "Jennifer told me something that night. She said if anything happened to her, I should go to her notebooks. But I never found them. They disappeared after the police searched her apartment." This revelation shook Sarah. Evidence had been tampered with, perhaps even stolen. Someone didn't just want Jennifer gone. They wanted her story erased. One night, Daniel Miles was going through some old boxes in his parents' attic when he stumbled upon something shocking. One of Jennifer's missing notebooks, hidden inside an old winter coat. The notebook contained names, dates, and detailed notes about police officers allegedly taking bribes from gambling operators connected to organized crime in Philadelphia. One name appeared over and over again: Sergeant Mark Riley. The last entry in the notebook, written just hours before Jennifer disappeared, read "Meeting tonight." If this is true, Riley isn't just dirty, he's dangerous. Need to be careful. Daniel rushed the notebook to Detective Connors. For the first time in years, the cold case had a pulse again. With this new evidence, Sarah filed for the case to be officially reopened. The news spread quickly, and Cedar Creek was thrown back into the nightmare it thought was buried. Old wounds reopened, secrets resurfaced, and for the first time, the possibility of justice flickered in the air. But reopening the case also meant danger. People who had spent years keeping their secrets safe would not allow them to be exposed so easily. And as Sarah and Daniel would soon discover, Jennifer's disappearance was not just about one corrupt officer, it was about a whole network of betrayal that reached deeper than anyone imagined. The reopening of Jennifer Miles' case in 2011 sent a ripple of fear across Cedar Creek. For years, people had grown used to the silence, the idea that Jennifer's fate was simply one of those mysteries. But now the silence was broken. Old names resurfaced, and old lies began to crumble. Detective Sarah Connors knew she had stepped into dangerous territory. The moment the case became public again, she noticed things: her car being followed late at night, anonymous calls with no one on the other end, and townsfolk suddenly turning cold when she entered the diner. Cedar Creek was small, but its secrets were heavy. Sarah decided to track down Mark Riley, the retired sergeant who had moved to Florida. On paper, Riley had left the force with honors. He was decorated, respected, and still received a generous pension. But when Sarah and Daniel reviewed Jennifer's notebook, it became clear Riley was no hero. He was at the center of everything Jennifer had uncovered. Sarah flew to Florida under the pretense of a casual interview. Riley lived in a gated community, tan and overweight, enjoying his retirement. At first, he was dismissive. "Jennifer, that was a sad case, but it's old news. She probably ran off with some boyfriend. Chasing ghosts won't help anyone." But Sarah noticed something when she mentioned the black pickup truck spotted near the bridge. Riley's hand trembled slightly as he lifted his glass of water. He quickly changed the subject, insisting he didn't recall. Sarah left Florida without a confession but with confirmation. Riley was hiding something. Back in Cedar Creek, Daniel confronted one of Jennifer's old colleagues from the local paper, a man named Tom Whitaker. Tom had worked closely with Jennifer before she disappeared, but he had stayed silent for years. When Daniel pressed him, Tom finally broke down. "She told me she had proof, real proof. She said Riley was laundering money through the police department. I told her to be careful. The next night, she was gone. You think that's a coincidence?" When Daniel asked why he never came forward, Tom's face turned pale. "Because I got a warning. A note slipped under my door. Stay quiet, or you'll be next." And I believed it. The revelation added another layer of darkness. Jennifer hadn't just stumbled onto small town corruption. She had walked straight into a nest of organized crime, protected by the very people sworn to uphold the law. Through her research, Sarah learned about a man named Eddie Barnes, a petty criminal who had been arrested multiple times in Cedar Creek in the late 90s. Eddie had allegedly bragged in jail about knowing what happened to the reporter girl. But when Sarah searched for him, she discovered Eddie had disappeared too, vanished in 2000, just 2 years after Jennifer. Some believed Eddie fled the state. Others whispered he had been silenced permanently. This chilling connection raised an unsettling possibility. Jennifer's case wasn't just a one-time disappearance. It was part of a pattern. Anyone who knew too much was either silenced or erased. One night, Daniel was going through boxes in the basement of the old Miles family home when he discovered an envelope wedged behind a broken cabinet. Inside were several photographs, grainy, taken at night, showing men gathered near what looked like the old Cedar Creek bridge. In one photo, a black pickup truck was clearly visible. Scrawled on the back of the photos was a single line, written in Jennifer's handwriting. "This is bigger than Cedar Creek." The photos were damning. They placed Riley's truck at the very spot where Jennifer vanished. But there was something else. One of the men in the photos wasn't a local. Sarah recognized him from FBI files: Victor Marino, a known associate of the Philadelphia mob. This changed everything. Jennifer's disappearance was no longer just about local corruption. It was tied to organized crime operations that stretched far beyond Cedar Creek. As Sarah prepared to hand the new evidence over to federal investigators, she received a chilling warning. Someone broke into her car outside the station. Nothing was stolen, but a single Polaroid had been left on the driver's seat. It showed a woman with dark hair, bound and gagged, sitting in the back of a vehicle. The caption, written in black marker, read, "She should have stayed quiet." Sarah's blood ran cold. The woman in the photo was Jennifer. Though the picture was old, possibly taken the night she disappeared. It confirmed one thing: Jennifer hadn't just vanished. She had been abducted, and someone in town had kept this photo hidden for years. The discovery set off a firestorm. If Jennifer had been taken alive, what happened afterward? Who took the photo, and why surface it now? For Daniel, the photo reignited hope, but also unbearable pain. His sister hadn't just been a victim, she had suffered, possibly for hours or days, before vanishing forever. For Sarah, the message was clear: they were getting close. Too close. And the people who had silenced Jennifer once were ready to silence anyone who threatened to expose the truth again. The investigation was no longer about finding evidence. It was about survival. Detective Sarah Connors stared at the Polaroid for hours that night. Jennifer's terrified face, bound and gagged in the back of a vehicle, haunted her. It was more than evidence. It was a message from the past and a warning for the present. Whoever had kept this photo was watching closely, making sure Cedar Creek's secret stayed buried. For Daniel, the photo reopened every wound. For years, he had imagined his sister's last moments, but this was proof she had been alive, terrified, but alive, after leaving the diner. The image filled him with rage and with determination. Sarah contacted the FBI, presenting the notebook, the photos, and now the Polaroid. The Bureau had long been investigating the Marino crime family, one of Philadelphia's most dangerous mob groups. Seeing Victor Marino in Jennifer's photos connected Cedar Creek's corruption directly to the mob. The FBI agreed to assist, but warned Sarah, "You're walking into a hornet's nest." If Jennifer was taken because she knew too much, the same people are still out there, and they won't hesitate to kill again. With federal backing, Sarah and Daniel confronted Mark Riley once more. This time, they came armed with the photographs. When Riley saw the images of his truck near the bridge, his face drained of color. At first, he denied everything, claiming the pictures were fake. But under mounting pressure, Riley finally broke. His confession was fragmented, but it revealed the dark truth. Jennifer had arranged to meet him the night she disappeared. She had threatened to publish her findings about his ties to Marino's gambling operations. Riley admitted he went to the bridge, but insisted he didn't kill her. According to him, Marino's men showed up that night, furious that Jennifer was digging into their business. Riley claimed they took her, and he had no choice but to stand by. "You don't understand," Riley muttered. "They own this town. One word from me, and I'd be floating in that river too." But when asked where Jennifer was taken, Riley grew silent. Either he truly didn't know, or he was too afraid to say. The FBI dug deeper, re-examining old financial records. They discovered that just days after Jennifer's disappearance, Riley's bank account received a massive deposit. Money traced back to shell companies run by Marino's syndicate. It was payment for his silence. But the most chilling discovery came from an unexpected source. A retired mob driver, now in witness protection, confessed that he had once driven a young woman from Cedar Creek to an abandoned warehouse outside Philadelphia in 1998. He remembered her because she kept asking him one question through her gag: "Does my family know I'm alive?" According to the driver, Jennifer was handed over to Marino's men at the warehouse. What happened after that, he never knew. The warehouse itself had long since burned down, likely torched to erase evidence. For Daniel, it was devastating. There would be no miraculous rescue, no hidden captivity where Jennifer still waited. She was gone. But at last, there was clarity. Jennifer had been silenced because she had come too close to exposing the truth. With Riley's confession and the new mob testimony, federal prosecutors charged him with conspiracy and obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. It wasn't for murder, but it was accountability, the first crack in Cedar Creek's wall of silence. The Marino family's operations in Pennsylvania also faced a sweeping federal crackdown. Dozens were arrested, their gambling network dismantled. Jennifer's story, the one she had died chasing, finally came to light. In 2013, a memorial was held at the old Cedar Creek Bridge. Dozens of people gathered, holding candles as Jennifer's name was read aloud. Daniel spoke through tears. "My sister wanted the truth. They tried to silence her, but today, her voice is louder than ever." The Miles family never recovered fully from their loss, but they finally had answers. Margaret Miles passed away in 2015, her daughter's photograph still framed beside her bed. Daniel, forever changed, began speaking publicly about cold cases, urging families never to give up. Detective Sarah Connors was promoted, recognized for her relentless pursuit of justice in the face of danger. But even she admitted, late at night, she still wondered what Jennifer's final moments had been like, and whether someone in Cedar Creek still knew more than they ever admitted. Jennifer Miles' name became a symbol. Her story was taught in journalism schools, a cautionary tale of the risks faced by truth seekers, but also a reminder of their importance. She had died chasing the truth, but in the end, the truth was found. Jennifer Miles never lived to see the truth she died chasing. But in the end, her voice broke through the silence that tried to bury it. Cedar Creek's perfect image was shattered, and those who believed they could hide behind power and fear were finally exposed. For her family, the answers came too late to bring her home, but not too late to bring her justice. Jennifer's story reminds us of one thing: lies may hide in the shadows, but truth always fights its way into the light. And sometimes, it takes the courage of one voice to change everything.